is the 5e game rules, like how to play, what those mechanics are. This is very much designed to be a recurring live stream and an opportunity for you to, if you're new to the game and you want to know more about it, this is where I will answer those questions. So there is a presentation aspect to it, and then there is a section where there's some Q&A, and there will be some demonstration in the future. I am just unable to do demonstration at this time, and I'm just waiting for the ad to finish because apparently I can't skip my own ads. Yeah, so my desk is covered in things, so the demonstration aspect will happen after that. Dungeon Master Josh, hello, welcome to the live stream. I'm hoping that eventually I had two unskippable ads that were 15 seconds long each. That was huge. Okay, all right, I'll put my poll up. Actually, as it happens, since you are here, Dungeon Master Josh, I was going to ask you if you wanted an invitation to the Dungeon Master Roundtable and maybe meet a few people. Okay? You let me know if you're interested. Or you won't. You know where my email is. It's in the About section. If you would prefer to answer there, you don't need to do so in a live stream. That's not necessary. Okay. Certainly you can have a think about it too. Anyway, I'm going to get into this. We'll see how we do. I have a slide presentation, do some Q&A. Will not be able to do the demonstration stuff today because my desk is just covered and stuff, so I can't put maps miniatures out today. But I will certainly do as much of the explanation stuff as I can, break it down so it's super simple. I know people often seem to use my videos if they aren't very familiar with something like English, and so I know I need to be very, very sort of careful about how I explain stuff. I'm going to do the best I can. You avoid the... Right, fair enough. Okay, yes, I don't... I haven't done that, actually. I probably should. But anyway, let's get into it. Hi, welcome to How to D&D. My name is Fred Wheeler, and today I want to talk about Dungeons & Dragons, because usually I do talk about Dungeons & Dragons. Today is a Dungeons & Dragons 5e rules tutorial. Now, you'll see I have marked this as Lesson 1, and Lesson 1 is going to be the basic game mechanics. These are the things that generally don't change very much. It doesn't really matter what edition of the game you play. These things have sort of always existed, and they're very much about the same. I mean, there might be slight tweaking, but you're pretty safe in terms of these mechanics. There are a couple of mechanics at the very end of this that are very specific to 5e, which have been pulled from other game systems. So I'm going to talk about them as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just sort of give you an idea of the overview for today. The overview is going to be the following. I'm going to talk about the creature ability scores and sort of what they do and what they mean. I'm going to talk about how to make an ability check. I'm going to talk about making skill checks, which is just a different type of ability check, really. Saving throws, what they are and how to do them. Attack rolls, what they are and how to do them. I'm going to talk about DC, which is difficulty class. I'm going to talk about contests, which is probably one of the more confusing concepts in Dungeons & Dragons 5e that you can have. I'm also going to talk about attack rolls, or AC, and how that works in the game. And then finally, one of the very common mechanics that you will find in Dungeons & Dragons 5e is advantage, how that works, and disadvantage, and how that works. And I have no intention of going into fine detail unless people ask me to do so. So the objectives for today are to explain as much of the stuff as I just mentioned. The demonstration aspect will happen in the future. Don't need to worry about this not being run again. It will run again in the future, okay? And I'll do a demonstration. There'll be maps when that happens. And then the participation aspect we can't do because I haven't set that up yet. But that's all for the future, okay? So at least we will achieve one of our objectives today. For those of you who are unaware, Dungeons & Dragons has a now acquired D&D Beyond. So you can get the basic game mechanics for Dungeons & Dragons 5e. It's now available for free on D&D Beyond. You can also get it straight off the, I believe, the Dungeons & Dragons official website if you want to. So you can play for free. Okay, so it's not like something you have to pay for. You won't get everything, but you'll get most of what you need. So let's talk about the first thing that comes up. And I thought what I would do is I would use an analogy with tomato. And you will bear with me as I explain this, because it seems a little odd when I start talking about tomatoes, I do realize. But there are 6 abilities that provide like a quick description of every creature or characters or monsters' physical and mental characteristics, okay? And there are 3 for the physical and 3 for the mental. The whole game mechanics are based on these ability scores when you try to do anything in the game. And so the first one is strength. And this measures your physical power. So to give you an idea of how that works, that's a character's ability to crush a tomato in their hand. That's physical strength. And then we have dexterity. Dexterity is measuring your agility and the ability to move quickly. So this is a little different in that this is now your character's ability to avoid being hit by a tomato that is thrown at you. Constitution, this measures your endurance and your ability to fight off anything that might affect your body. And a character, their ability to eat a rotten tomato is the analogy I'm going to use, and not get sick. So if you can eat a rotten tomato and not get sick, you have a very good constitution. Intelligence, this is measuring reasoning and your memory. Now, it does not mean that you are smart. It's just your ability to reason and deduct and your memory, okay, which is what we're looking at. So this is a character's ability to know that a tomato is in fact a fruit and not a vegetable. And then wisdom, which is often confused with intelligence, but wisdom measures your perception and your insight. This is a character's ability to understand that the tomato doesn't go into a fruit salad. So you may be starting to wonder where we're going with this, but this is the way I thought I would explain things. The last one is charisma, and this measures your force of personality, like, you know, how strong is your personality. It can, in some respects, measure sort of how pretty you are, but it's not really that. It's more force of personality. And this is a character's ability to sell a rotten tomato to a customer. Like, if you're really good at selling stuff and you can present yourself really well, you can pretty much dupe anybody. So selling that rotten tomato to the customers is what you're really good at. And that means you have a high charisma when you can do that. Okay, so this is the basics of our game. And we use all of these 6 ability scores to do everything with all of the game mechanics. Everything is based off that. So what are the core Dungeons & Dragons 5e dice mechanics? I'm going to start at the very beginning, and we're going to start with the ability check. You might be thinking, well, hang on, what about how do I make an ability check? Well, yes, let's talk about how to make an ability check. The easiest way to explain how to make an ability check when you are asked to do so is you roll a 20-sided dice. That's the dice that has 20 sides. You're going to add your ability check modifier. Okay, so there's an ability modifier. You have your score, which is a big number, and then there's a smaller number that you utilize, and that's all really about just like making sure that you take that small number and you add it to the dice roll. And the total will add up to your ability check. And you do this for whatever ability check is asked for. So ability checks allow you to do actions. Okay, there is a chance for failure. So the only time you're usually asked to make an ability check is if there is actually a chance that you could fail that task. You'll find the information on page 174 of the Player's Handbook. Now, it's not just about characters. An ability check is a test of not just a character, but also a monster's effort to overcome any kind of challenge or some sort of threat. And you can also apply this to your Dungeon Master NPCs. Okay, so this is fundamental for everything. These are the checks that you use to fill in the gaps. So these are the most important mechanics in the game, and if you understand this one, anything that you get confused about and there doesn't seem to be a rule to fill in the gaps, this is the one that you use, okay? All right, let's go on to skill checks and skills, because I think that's probably what you want to know next. There are quite a few skills that need to be covered. I'm going to try to run down as many of them as I possibly can. So skill checks or skills, these are specialized ability checks. So it's like taking the ability and we're breaking it down into smaller elements. They allow you to perform actions. There's also a chance for failure again. You might find that your skill check is going to have some sort of training involved. This is where we add our proficiency bonus to our skill check. And that really is essentially based off the ability modifiers. Okay, so page 174 has a lot more information on that. I'm not going to make it too complicated for you. The skill check is a test of a character or a monster's specific aspect of an ability to overcome a challenge. So if we were talking about something like strength, then what we would use in terms of in conjunction with strength, we could have athletics. That's the skill. And you would use your strength modifier for athletics. And if you're trained in athletics, but you may not be trained in athletics, but if you are trained, then you get to add your proficiency bonus. If you're not trained, you don't add your proficiency bonus. But essentially it means that if you're not trained, then your strength modifier is the same as your athletics modifier for your skill. Okay. There are 18 different skills in the game, and there is athletics, acrobatics, which is pretty self-explanatory, your ability to do acrobatic feats. Sleight of hand is being able to manipulate and move something very carefully without being spotted. Stealth is moving silently and quickly and not giving yourself away. Arcana is about your knowledge of magic. History is your knowledge of history, obviously, and then investigation is your ability to be a bit like Sherlock Holmes and deduct and make an investigation and actually come to a conclusion based on the evidence and clues. Nature is your understanding of how nature works, so that's a knowledge skill. Religion, again, is about your knowledge of different religions and deities. Your animal handling is your ability to work with animals and not piss them off. Insight is your ability to determine if somebody is lying, telling the truth. It's the psychology aspect, your ability to read people, reading body language, stuff like that. That would be insight. And then we have medicine, your ability to understand. It's like your knowledge of how healing and medicine works, your ability to perform a task, usually to stabilize somebody, but it can be a lot of other things. You can do the forensic aspect of the game with medicine. Perception is about your senses, so your ability to see, smell, hear, and feel something. That's your perception. Survival is your understanding of how to survive in the wild or wilds or in the world overall. Deception is your ability to trick somebody, and then intimidation is your ability to basically force yourself over onto somebody else and scare the bejesus out of them. Another very useful skill for those of you who like that sort of stuff. Performance is around performing something that requires, say, maybe singing, playing a musical instrument. It may be putting on a stage show, something like that. That's your performance. And then persuasion is being able to convince somebody, not trick them, that's deception, but persuade somebody. And this is very much focused on your charisma. So those are the different skills in the game that we have, that we utilize. And they are simply an extension of the ability check. Right, so now that we've got all the different skills, you probably want to know, how do I actually make a skill check? The good thing about a skill check is it's pretty much the same process as the ability check. Okay, you're going to be asked to make a skill check by the Dungeon Master. You never roll these things unless the Dungeon Master asks you to do so. You're going to take your skill modifier for whichever skill it is going to be, okay? And it's calculated by adding your ability modifier. You also add your proficiency bonus if your character is proficient or trained in that skill, and you're going to add it to a 20-sided dice roll, okay? Once you add the 20-sided dice roll, your ability modifier, which may well be your skill modifier in this case, okay? And then if you are proficient, you'll have your proficiency bonus. Okay, there you get your result. That is your skill check. Okay. All right, so that's the basics of doing a skill check. The next one is a lot more complicated because everything we've been talking about has been around doing something. Like you actually perform a task, you do something in the game. And now we have to talk about an aspect of the game which I don't normally do videos on. Primarily because I think it's probably the most confusing aspect of the game, and therefore I have avoided talking about it. But this is how I'm going to present it for today. The creature saving throw. Okay, this could be a character, this could be a monster, this could be a creature. There's a specific reason for performing a saving throw. Saving throw mechanics are your ability to resist a spell, resist a trap, or avoid a trap, or the trap effect, should I say, resisting some sort of poison, resisting the effect of a disease, maybe resisting a hazard that takes place or a harmful force. And you'll find the information on page 179 of the Player's Handbook. The saving throw is an automatic and forced attempt to resist a threat. So you usually don't have control over this, okay? Whether the character or the monster, you don't get to choose. It just happens. And I know there'll be some times where people will say, well, can I decide to fail a saving throw? Really, that's not something you have control over. There may be situations where it makes sense, but that will be up to your dungeon master, and I'm not going to get into that. Ultimately, you are resisting it in some way. Okay, there are 6 saving throws related to the abilities. Each one is tied to the 6 abilities that I talked about. That's your strength, your dexterity, the intelligence, the constitution, wisdom, and charisma. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you sort of like a couple of examples of how a saving throw might be related in your game. The first one being is a strength saving throw. This would be, you'd make a strength saving throw to stop being pushed by a strong wind. Like if there's a wind that's really powerful and trying to push against you, you would use this to resist that. Otherwise, you get blown away. A dexterity saving throw, you would use that to avoid being hit by a rolling boulder trap. Like if there's a huge boulder, like from Indiana Jones and Raiders of the Lost Ark, you don't want to get squished, so you would use a dexterity saving throw to avoid getting, so you can get out of the way quickly. Constitution saving throw, you'd use this to resist the poison laced in a drink. So if you drink something and it's laced with poison, there's a chance that you may survive the effect because you have a really good Constitution saving throw. In other words, a big number. Big numbers are good in the game. Intelligence saving throws. This is to disbelieve an illusion created by magic. It's usually used in this case. Wisdom saving throws is to resist being charmed by a mermaid. So a mermaid does a bit of a sing, does a little prance, and would, of course, drag you down below the sea. But hopefully your wisdom is good, and your wisdom saving throw will help you resist that temptation. And the last one is the charisma saving throw, and this is usually to avoid being possessed by a ghost. So is your ability to control yourself in many respects. It's really about affecting others, but also controlling yourself. And this is where a charisma saving throw would take place, stopping being possessed by a ghost that tries to enter your body. So those are the different types of saving throws that we have in the game. So how do we actually go about making a saving throw? Fortunately for you, the process is very much the same as all the other processes I've been talking about. Some saving throw modifiers are calculated the following way. You use your ability modifier for whichever ability is related to the saving throw you need to make. And if you are proficient, you would then add your proficiency bonus if you're trained in that particular saving throw, okay? I'm saying trained or proficient, but basically it's the same concept. If you are not proficient, then you would not add it to the saving throw. Okay, all right. Now that we have our saving throw modifier, we're going to take our saving throw modifier, we're going to roll a 20-sided dice, and the result of the 20-sided dice that we add to our saving throw modifier gives us the saving throw check. That's what we do to make a saving throw, okay? You will have already noticed a set pattern to how 20-sided dice roll mechanics work. Fortunately, most of them are pretty much exactly the same, but there are some slight changes. Okay, let's deal with something like the attack roll. Attack rolls, this is your ability to hit a creature in combat and effectively hurt them. Okay, you might strike a creature but not hurt them, so that doesn't get considered a hit. So when we talk about making an attack roll and hitting a creature, if you miss, you may have actually struck the creature, but you never hit them in a place that was vital enough to do anything to them. So they never lose any hit points. So attack rolls to hit are about you hit and actually reduce their hit points. The information on this is on page 193 to 195 of the player's handbook. Attack rolls represent a character or monster's attempt to successfully and significantly force a reduction in hit points, as I said. You can do this through ranged weapons, close quarter weapons like a melee attack. You can use a ranged spell. You can use a melee or close quarter spell. You can use an unarmed strike. You can headbutt them, punch them, kick them. You can use claws. If you've got claws, you can use your teeth. You might have a natural body part that you can sort of, maybe you've got a tail and you can swing it, okay? This is related to not just characters but monsters, remember. So that's how an attack roll, this is what it represents. So how do we actually perform an attack roll against something, whether it be a character or a monster? Nice and simple. Yet again, you'll have noticed the set pattern keeps coming up here. Some attack rolls are calculated the following way. You usually use the ability modifier related to that particular attack. So in most cases, if you're using a melee or close quarter attack, you're going to be using strength. Not always, sometimes it will be dexterity, but there aren't that many situations where that occur, but there are some, okay? But generally, it's going to be strength, but not always. If we are using a ranged weapon, most of the time we're going to be using our dexterity modifier. But not in all cases, such as a thrown weapon, we would use a strength modifier because we're having to hurl something. So strength takes place rather than a dexterity modifier. Now, once we have the right modifier, we're going to be adding our proficiency bonus to the character if they are trained in that type of attack. Okay? Or they are proficient in that type of attack. If they're not proficient or trained in that type of attack, then they don't get to add their proficiency bonus to the attack roll. Once we have our attack modifier, we're going to roll a 20-sided dice, and the end result gives us the attack check, basically. Okay, they also refer to it as the attack roll to hit. And that's how you make an attack. And then once we actually hit and do significant damage, okay, in other words, we reduce hit points, then we would actually roll for doing damage. All right, so now that we have the basics, which you can tell there are ability checks, there are skill checks, which are a version of ability checks. We have saving throws to resist stuff. We have attack rolls to actually hurt or harm something or hit something. Now we have to actually figure out which one are we using, because there are a couple of different mechanics involved. There are actually 3 ways of determining whether we have success or failure. And it would be nice if we only had one, but unfortunately we don't. And I cannot apologize more for the fact that it exists that way, but it is, unfortunately. So how do we resolve dice mechanics? I need to actually take a break and drink some water. Okay, when we are resolving something like dice mechanics, whether it be an ability score or a skill check or even a saving throw, these are worked out a particular way. And this is usually you compare whatever you get for your saving throw, your skill check, or your ability check, you're going to compare it to a difficulty class, or it's also called a DC, or difficulty class. What we're trying to do with that check, okay, is the ability or the skill check or the saving throw needs to be equal to or greater than the DC or difficulty class. So equal to or greater than. Okay, that would be a success. If we get less than the difficulty class or DC, we fail at that task. And that's it. You might be thinking, well, can I retry checks? Totally up. That's up to the dungeon master. Okay, but generally you usually have one attempt and that's it. Unless, of course, your dungeon master allows for multiple checks to be made, which is not a common practice in Dungeons & Dragons 5e. Typical difficulty classes that you will find, or DCs, these are 5 is very easy. You're probably not going to be called to make a DC 5. DC 10 is easy. I know some people still use DC 10s. I know Wizards of the Coast Adventures do. DC 15 is far more common, and that's medium difficulty. A DC 20 is hard, so that's a very hard task. A 25 is very hard, and then a 30 is near impossible. And we don't have anything that's less than a 5 or greater than a 30. The scale is just 5 right through to 30. And you can have numbers in between 10 and 15. You might have a 12 or a 13 for your DC. So there can be a range, and it's completely up to the dungeon master or the adventure you're running in terms of how that's going to work. So that's your difficulty class. There is another one, probably vastly the most difficult to understand and really confusing, frankly, for a lot of people, and I totally understand why. This is called a contest. This is where you take your ability check or your skill check, and it's resolved in some situations, not in all situations. There are specific times we would use this, where you're going to take the two difficulty abilities, whether it's be an ability check or a skill check, we're going to compare them, okay? So imagine that you as the player character are trying to maybe do an arm wrestle. That we're trying to do some arm wrestling, and so we're going to make a strength check in this case. It could be an athletics check, but a strength check. And the contest is between a rather large creature, maybe like a minotaur, and they are also going to be making a strength check or possibly an athletics check. Now, it's no good getting exactly the same score as the other creature. Like if you're trying to arm wrestle a minotaur, you can't get less than, you would fail. That would be failure. You can't get equal to whatever they get. That would just mean you stay exactly where you are, nothing changes. You must get greater than. Okay, so it's slightly different to the difficulty class system. Okay, you must get greater than. These don't come up very often. They generally tend to be used for something like a grapple or a shove, although I'm hoping that that doesn't remain the same. It might remain that way. Okay, so that's how the contest works. If you find the contest confusing, I can assure you that many people have found it confusing. One that you're going to come across probably the most, particularly in combat, is armor class. This is where we actually make an attack. So you take your attack roll and you're going to compare it to the target or creature's armor class or AC. You're trying to say hit a dragon with your sword, and you take your attack roll that we've made, the attack roll to hit. We take that final number. This is when we rolled that 20-sided dice and we added our attack roll modifier. Okay, and then we get a result, and if it is equal to or greater than, we actually hit the target's armor class and do damage. If we get less than the armor class, it's a miss, or you can consider it you struck the target but you did not do any significant damage to it. Okay, probably the easiest way to understand it is if you get less than, you miss. But again, as I said, this is a very abstract concept. It's a game concept. Okay, so there are some variations on this. Okay, what about how do we actually perform some of the stuff? Like, how do we make an attack roll? There are so many different ways that attack damage is actually worked out. So once you actually hit with your attack roll, you're going to roll the appropriate damage dice and apply the appropriate damage modifiers. And there are so many that I could not possibly cover them all in this particular video. So I'm not going to try. I'm just going to move you on to the next mechanic. Okay. All right, let's talk about advantage. This is the advantage dice mechanic. Like, how does this work? When do we get it? Well, you get to use advantage on any D20 or 20-sided dice roll when it applies. So when you have advantage, they only ever apply to a 20-sided dice roll or a D20 roll. What you do is you take two 20-sided dice and you roll them, and you take the higher of the two rolls. This is representing that you are better at doing things than you were before, compared to just rolling one dice, because normally we will roll one dice, but now we're rolling two. You can do this for an ability check, or a skill check, or a saving throw, or an attack roll. Okay, any D20 roll. Very common mechanic, and you will probably come across it a lot. The last one is where things aren't working your way. Like, you may wind up with disadvantage. Disadvantage is when things aren't really going your way, whereas advantage is when things are working in your favor. So what we do is, it again applies to any D20 roll or 20-sided dice roll. We roll two 20-sided dice, and you use the lowest result on the two rolls. This represents that you aren't doing as well as you would normally be able to. Okay, so this can apply to an ability check, a saving throw, a skill check, and attack roll. All of those, but nothing else. It never applies to a damage roll. It only ever applies to those checks I just mentioned. Now, one of the confusing aspects of advantage and disadvantage is the interplay. If you have more than one circumstance that gives you advantage, you don't get to stack them. So it doesn't mean that you get to have an additional 20-sided dice to roll. You can only have two 20-sided dice that you can roll in any given situation, because you can't stack them. There are some peculiar and ridiculous situations and specific game mechanics that do crop up that kind of mess with this a bit. But generally, you can't stack advantage. So you can only have one. You're only ever going to be rolling two dice at the most. All right, so what about disadvantage? Well, disadvantage, you can't stack that either. So if you have circumstances that give you disadvantage more than once, you can only roll one additional dice over the standard dice you would roll when you're doing disadvantage. So you're only ever going to be rolling two dice. You're never going to be rolling three, because you have two circumstances of disadvantage. The last aspect is advantage and disadvantage. If you have advantage on a roll and you also have disadvantage on the roll, and it doesn't matter how many circumstances give you advantage or disadvantage, because they don't stack. If you have advantage and disadvantage at the same time on the same dice roll for a 20-sided dice, they cancel each other out, and you just roll one dice. That's it. Now, I know that is an awful lot of information to take on board, given that you're dealing with just the basics of a game. I'm hoping that this wasn't too confusing for you. I want to talk a little bit about some of the miscellaneous recommendations that I have for you, particularly for Dungeon Masters, but also for players when you are confused about what you're supposed to do with these dice. If you are unsure what to do with a game mechanic in the game, with your character, the easiest way to resolve it is to get the character or the monster to roll a 20-sided dice and add the result of the 20-sided dice to any ability modifier that you think would apply. Okay? And then you use the various DC. You either use difficulty class, or use contest, or use an attack roll system, the AC system, to work out the result of whatever happens between the characters and the monsters, or the monsters and the characters. Anytime you ever have to perform any kind of task, if you're ever confused, just roll a 20-sided dice and add the appropriate ability modifier that you think works with that given situation. And that will get you past almost every situation that you ever come across. If you were ever concerned about, I don't know if it's going to be a difficulty class check, or is it going to be a contest, or should I be using armor class? Then just skip the contest, skip the armor class, and go directly to making a difficulty class check or DC check. And you'll solve most of your problems that way. Now, I'm hoping that this was useful to you in some way, that you got the information that you required, and I wish you all the best in your games in the future. I'm going to say it right now that understanding 5e rules, like any rule system, it may be slightly better than some of the earlier versions of the game, yes, but it's still quite confusing at times. I do understand that. That's why I'm here, and this is why I'm going to do these. So wherever you are in the world, I want to really thank my patrons, the people who watch my videos and my live streams, and I really want to thank you for paying attention. Hopefully I have explained it clearly, and hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s. All right, I'm not gone. I will do some Q&A. I'm here for that. Let us go back to the chat. So here's what I'm going to say right now. I do actually need a bit of feedback. You know, I figure that if I do this enough, I run this particular module enough, I'll get better and better at explaining it. But you will let me know what parts of this worked really well for you and which parts did not. Okay, so let me just, I actually want to look at the poll, and then I'm going to go down here. Now, I know the best way to ensure that I keep doing these sorts of things. Now, I know that this is, I know joining up to Patreon, you're not necessarily going to get very much as a player. If all you do is play and you're not a Dungeon Master, you're probably not going to get very much. But my hope is that those of you who are Dungeon Masters and are trying to explain this stuff to people will utilize these classes and direct them in that, to here so that they can get this stuff explained to them. I'm hoping that once I can start doing the demonstration stuff, good. Yes, the spelling mistake. Match. I've put much. Dear. Yeah, that's a thank you. That's a quality improvement issue right there. Is it Eon? Eon. So yeah. So direct them to these videos, and I will sort out any problems that might have cropped up in terms of like spelling mistakes. Okay. Now I just want to look at the poll quickly. How long have you been playing Dungeons & Dragons 5e? Never, 6% out of 18. Less than 3 months, 22%, okay. Between 3 months to 6 months, 6%, and 67% have been playing for more than 6 months. Okay, all right, interesting, good to know. I'm going to say again, hi to Dungeon Master Josh. Josh has a channel, a YouTube channel. You should go and check out his stuff, okay. All right, the Dallas, how's it going? Tomato analogy, so good. Yes, so the tomato analogy, I had come across it before, but I had forgotten about it and kind of got a bit confused about why I should even use it. But Sadie Rogers was the one who said, look, if I explain the different ability scores and the different abilities to kids, I used tomato. The tomato analogy works really well. And so hence I managed to find a picture that goes with it, and I managed to write it down so it actually made sense. And hopefully it did make sense. Agile Monk is a patron, so is the Dallas. Both patrons here on the channel. So they really support this sort of thing continuing on. Page 197 of the Player's Handbook. Did I get something wrong here? Let me have a look to see if I've got this incorrect. 79. Is it? Ability checks allow Is that what we're talking about here? Which page have I ballsed up here? Let's have a look at the Player's Handbook and see if I got it wrong. This is not an old printing, so it should be right. 179. 179. Skills. What are we talking about here? Ability checks. No, I had said 179. Well, it can't be 179 because 179 is for... Yeah, you'll have to let me know what that's related to, Agile Monk. Did I make an error in my notes? If I did, yeah, just let me know. Okay. Whoops, that's not what I wanted to do. Let's go back to chat. I shall resist. Yep. Yeah, so 179 is saving throws. So that's correct, if that's what we were talking about. Yep. You need a food taster. Of course you do. It's only cool if it works. So feedback from you. This is the first time I've taken this program and turned it into a slideshow. Because in the past I would try to do it live with maps and miniatures, which is all very well, but actually very hard to do and not balls up because you get flustered during a live stream. It's very easy to make mistakes. Yeah. Which is also why I'm probably not going to cut sections out of this until I've got things nailed down. I will apologize for the slides. I'm live streaming in 4K, and the images that I have selected for my slideshow, the highest resolution for them, they're only suited for 1280 by 720, which means I need to go through every single slide and screen capture and then crop them and then re-upload them into OBS. You cannot imagine how much extra work that will take me, but it will eventually happen. So now that I've got match, I don't know how I managed to balls up match. So let's make sure I actually I can go into the slideshow now and make sure I make that adjustment. Since I've managed to get match, I was actually going to write equal to. I didn't like the word match, but I was convinced by somebody that I should use the word match. So let's just go and find, here it is. It's under difficulty class slide, match. Let's change that to T. These match. And then we're going to go down. I've got equal there, and it might be under attack. Yes, match. So difficulty class slide and the armor class slide. Eon, you have just updated and improved the class by pointing that out. I do appreciate it. Thank you. This was really well explained. Well done. Thank you, Josh. I do appreciate it. Okay. Christy. Hello, Christy. How's it going? This was so good. As a first-time DM and new player, contests are very confusing for me. Can you break down that section again? Yes, I can, actually. I guess giving you some examples is probably the best way. And I've got two large dice in front of me. And so even though I can't use maps and miniatures and demonstrate it that way, what I will do is I will sort of give you an idea of what's going on. When would we use a contest? There are some specific times that it does crop up. What do you got here, Josh? Creating guides can be really hard as you never know how much detail to go into. And yeah, exactly. So what I've done here, Josh, is as you already have noticed, you will know this, I've taken the bare bones basics, and I haven't gone into a huge amount of detail into all of the ridiculous circumstances and specifics, okay? And I've left all that stuff away because they bog down the game, and so I've only stayed with the basics. And the intention is there will always be a Q&A and demonstration aspect. So when people ask questions, I'll be able to demonstrate when I get my office sorted out, which is not quite fixed. And so I can then illustrate things and answer very specific questions when they have them, rather than trying to put them into the basic presentation, which would just be to try to explain Dungeons & Dragons that way. It's fine for very smart people who like complexity and can understand that easily, but it doesn't work that way. All right, Christy, let's talk about contests. What I'm going to do to demonstrate contests is I'm going to take two 20-sided dice, and I'm going to give you a scenario so that you can understand when we might use a contest. So this dice here is going to represent the player characters trying to do something. And the dice over here, this one represents, I wonder if I've got a little sticker I can stick on it. I will put a little label on it. Let's go with that color there. Yep, let's do that. Hopefully that'll work. Okay. All right. So you can see that one of the dice has got a little purple label on it. So two 20-sided dice here. Now the players want to do something here, and they got a monster that may resist them. So anytime your players are trying to do something that the Dungeon Master's monsters doesn't want to do, then there's going to be a contest, more than likely, taking place. Now, when does that occur? Well, if we were to do a grapple, so your player characters decide they want to grab onto the monster and hold them. Okay? Provided they're not too big, they can do it. So what do we do? Well, we must make a strength check or an athletics check. It can be either one to start the grapple. Okay? A strength check or an athletics check. Okay, one is an ability check, one is a skill check, but they're both related and very, very much so. That means that our monster, this is this one here, has to make another dice roll as well. Okay, and they're going to make either a strength check or an athletics check. But in the case of monsters, because they often don't have skills, it'll be one or the other. A strength check or an athletics check to resist the player character. They can also decide they don't want to use strength or athletics, and they could choose to use a dexterity check or a acrobatics check, which is related to dexterity, to try to resist. Right? That's what's taking place. So so you've got two different results, and they're competing with each other. The player character must get on their dice and on the final check that they perform, not just the dice, but when you add the modifier, okay, whatever they get, they must get greater than whatever the monster gets. Okay? If they get equal to, nothing happens. There's no grapple that occurs. Yep. If they get less than, it's unsuccessful. They must get greater than. So that is a grapple check. It's probably one of the most common ones you'll come across in Dungeons & Dragons 5e in the game. It's like, how does that work? That's what we do. Yep. What's that, Josh? How would love to hang out longer. No, it's right, but you got game in 10 minutes. Thank you for hanging out. I'll see you later. All right, so in the next one, let's talk about something like shoving. What if your player characters want to shove? Because they could. They could choose to shove somebody somewhere. Again, player character. This represents the player character rolling a dice for that. This is the monster trying to resist. Okay? Controlled by the Dungeon Master. The player needs to make a strength check or an athletics check. Either one of those. Athletics is related to strength. Okay? We do not get to make a dexterity check or an acrobatics check when we're trying to shove. If we're actually trying to shove, we must make a strength check or an athletics check. But to resist it, we're allowed to make a strength check. This is the monster resisting, trying to be shoved. You can make a strength check or an athletics check or a dexterity check, which has also got the acrobatics check. So one of those. They've got a lot more options because they're trying to resist. Okay? So when you're trying to resist a shove, it's not just about strength. It's about quickness and skill and maneuvering yourself. Yep. Same with a grapple. I know this because I did martial arts. And yeah. So grappling and shoving to resist is a combination of skill, strength, and speed. Whereas if you're trying to put them on, in this case, to make it simple for you, okay, we're only using, to actually apply it, we're only using strength and athletics. Athletics referring to if you are proficient in athletics, your athletics check would be slightly higher than your strength check if you're trained in athletics, which means you could put the grapple on faster. So this represents strength and training for the player character. Does that make sense? There are other ways that we can have contests. But I could spend forever giving you examples of how that work. Now, have I answered the question sufficiently, Christy? Does it have to be the same stat? No, not always. You select what you think is appropriate. So, for example, that answers your follow-up question. So in the case of grapple and shove, the rules are very specific about how you would do this. Okay, but there are circumstances where you could use different ability checks or skill checks to resist. And so, what might that look like? Well, yeah. So the grapple is well. See, the reason I selected the arm wrestling is directly related: strength to strength, athletics to athletics. So it's nice and simple. Grapple makes it a little bit more complicated, and so does shove. But there are other circumstances, as I said, where a contest could take place, and say the player character. What would be the example? I think the best example I can think of is playing cards, gambling. So we have our player and they're gambling. And you decide that they're going to make a sleight of hand or a dexterity check to perform this. Okay? You've decided that it's what's appropriate for them to roll to try and successfully deceive the monsters at the table or the NPCs at the table with the little purple label on it, to deceive them and trying to cheat at cards and hide a card that they can play later or bring it into play, right? Cheating at cards. We're going to be using a sleight of hand check or a dexterity check, okay? That's what we're utilizing. You could decide that, no, what would be appropriate is for them to use a charisma check, which is related to deception, and make a deception check. So you might decide any of those would be suitable. And then that would be contested by our monster or NPC at the table, who would then have an opportunity to notice, we're using a contest here, notice whether the player character palms the card at the playing table when they're playing cards. So what we would use to contest this, okay, as a contest? Well, we might decide that what's appropriate is to make a wisdom check for the monster or a perception check, particularly if they are proficient in perception, yep, which would be slightly higher than their wisdom's check when they perform it because of the modifier. Or you might decide actually wisdom or perception would be fine, or wisdom and maybe insight. Maybe we decide that insight is appropriate in the circumstance. So you can have different skills playing off against each other in a contest. It's about you deciding which skill and ability makes sense for what they're trying to do, and how that contest looks. Does that make sense? I hope it does. I hope it does. All right. Hello, Oscar. How's it going? The reason I don't want to use the grapple as my standard example is because I don't believe that the grapple rules will stay intact. I think that they will go. I believe they will become an attack roll, which frankly I wish they would. I think that contests have caused me far too much trouble. Yeah. There's a reason, Christy, why I did not go into a lot of detail during the slide presentation on contests, is because it requires so much adjudication by a dungeon master. It does talk about the sort of thing in the player's handbook, but unless somebody explains it to you and you see it at work, it's very hard to understand. Okay. All right, Oscar, what do you got here? How's it going? You're going to share this on your Facebook group and the WhatsApp group? Okay, cool. I will do my very best. You're going to go and read Curse of Strahd again. How many times, Oscar, you must have run the Curse of Strahd so many different times. Yeah, so I believe that the grapple and shove mechanics will probably change as part of the new rules coming out in 2024. It's not guaranteed yet, but I think it's a smart move. It would certainly clear up a lot of hassle that people have with contests. I don't think that necessarily the contest mechanic will disappear, but I think that the use of a contest will be very, very minimal unless a dungeon master thinks it's appropriate. Doing well between D&D and jobs. So Oscar has probably run the Curse of Strahd so many times, I'll tell you. Uh, we are probably going to wind up going back to talking about more gothic, horrifying monsters rather than Spelljammer monsters. It's things that you can add into your Ravenloft and your Curse of Strahd adventures. Okay. Yeah, so I'm going to talk. So I'm going to talk about one D&D because I looked at my channel analytics, and apparently everybody's looking for one D&D. It is in DND, and then one D&D is in one D and D, and then D&D one. So there were so many people looking for information on my channel with regard to that topic. I thought it was prudent to actually do a live stream tomorrow on the topic, and talk about some of that stuff. Because there is a lot of clickbait stuff, titles and thumbnails on YouTube with regard to this topic. The message boards have gone bananas with regard to the stuff that's been talked about on there. Not only that, I find that some of the perspectives from my comrades, competitors, whatever you want to call it, fellow YouTubers in the D&D roleplay game community are very panicky, and also a little bit, yeah, they're a little bit out there. So I thought I would break it all down for you, because I have actually been part of a Wizards of the Coast alpha playtest where the doors are closed and nobody's actually sort of presented with what's going on behind the scenes, and so I know how they work. They work the same way they always have. They don't really change their approach. Even with D&D Next, the approach was very much the same. So I'll be able to hopefully shed some light on that one D&D stuff. I'll be talking specifically about the rules glossary, not the backgrounds and not the races. Okay. You just don't worry about that other stuff. I know people are more upset about the core rule changes that they're talking about. Anyway, I can assure you that a lot of it is for the better. Okay, some of it is not, but yeah, I'll get to it tomorrow. Yeah, both Van Richten Guide to Ravenloft, waiting to receive it. Okay. I'm in the process of trying to arrange to get the Spelljammer book, which I'm not looking forward to because it's going to be very costly for me. The box set for the Spelljammer, Adventures in Space, and I'm not completely convinced that what I'm going to get is what I want. So, yeah. But I keep getting told by people that they don't like the book. So I want to see it for myself, and I will do a book review again when my desk is clear and I can actually show you the book as I talk, because that's how I do things. Right. Christy, you want to say thank you? The Lost Mine of Fendelver videos. So, look, one of the best ways you can support me is on Patreon or Super Chats and Super Stickers. Like, that's like the easiest way. I'm going to tell you right now, I did upload Wave Echo Cave, the Dungeon Master Guide, or handout, should I say. It's the Dungeon Master handout for Wave Echo Cave Part 2. That's the final section, the second half of that location. So the documentation for that has gone up. It's on Patreon. You can pay a dollar or a little bit more, about $1 a month. Yeah, that's the lowest I think you can pay when you get it. You get everything. There's no tiers, okay? And you will eventually, this weekend coming up, I'm going to be doing the last lesson. It'll be lesson 8, which will be the Ruins of Thunder Tree. And I will be discussing that in detail, okay? So for those of you who have been waiting for the Ruins of Thunder Tree and for me to discuss it, it's coming. For those of you who have seen and already experienced that on Lighthall when I was running the program there, I can assure you I have made some updates to it. And yeah, it's just a matter of getting the slideshow sorted out, which I will be doing probably today on Discord if my body holds out, because I'm feeling under the weather. I don't have COVID, but I'm feeling a little bit under the weather. I'm feeling a little headachy and a little tired and a bit scratchy and so forth. I've been watching them non-stop for the past few days, prepping for my next session. Okay. Well, here's a question, Christy. I didn't actually put all of the non-player character videos that I've done. So you probably know that I've done a lot of stuff on the non-player characters in the Lost Mine of Phandelver and breaking them down and giving you more information. I don't have write-ups on Patreon for all of them. I think there may be a handful that exist. The question is, to those of you who are there, would it be helpful for me to complete the documentation for them and put them up onto Patreon so you can download them and just have them as a resource? And then, of course, you just punch a hole in it and stick it in a folder like everything else, okay? I mean, I could do that. It might take me a little while, but I could do that. Fendar, hello Fendar. Fendar is a patron. There's a lot of patrons here today. You're looking forward to tomorrow's live stream. Good. I'm glad you are. I have taken copious notes. So every outrageous and crazy thing and every legitimate concern that people have had, I've written down those questions or topics and I've got a response for them. Okay? Some you will like and some you won't. I'm going to try to bring some rationality to things, because right now I do feel like the clickbait season is well and truly alive, and we're going to be getting playtest material every month, if not sooner. Like I can assure you, as soon as the survey closes, the next playtest packet will be coming. That they don't have time to muck around. They have to get it done. Because they've left it way too late. They should have started at the beginning of the year. But they've probably done a lot of alpha playtesting in the background before they got the playtest material ready for the public. Okay. Me, I've actually only run the Curse of Strahd once. And I've run the original Ravenloft adventure. But I think after I ran the original Ravenloft adventure, I felt so bad for my players that I didn't want to run the Curse of Strahd when it got published. So then when I ran the Curse of Strahd, which was like a year and a half of playing like every week for 2 hours, in the end, I decided when I finished that, I didn't want to run it again. It's like old pizza to me, you know. The pizza's good the first time round, and after that, we'll just leave it alone. It's not that I don't like it. I love the adventure. I think it's great. But for me, ultimately, I just felt so it's a hard adventure for players to deal with. And I wanted them to go on a different experience for me. Let's try something different. Christy, what do you got here? Your group is halfway through Cragmore Cave. Okay. We just started, so the ones have... Okay. Yeah, so you will have everything that you need by the time you get to the final encounters. All that material will be available. You won't have any problems whatsoever. And again, like I said, you know, if you're wanting the documentation so you don't have to write notes, then it'll all be on Patreon. Yeah, well, that's the nature of the Curse of Strahd. It's gothic horror, so it appeals to a certain people. Well, I'm surprised when I put up the poll and I asked, "Do you want me to talk about 1D&D's rules glossary?" I was thinking, you guys have seen, you must have been, your feeds must have been absolutely inundated with 1D&D and the changes to the rules and what's going to happen with a 20-sided dice roll and what's going to happen with critical hits and what's happening with inspiration and what's happening with blah, 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 blah. I'm like, I am surprised in terms of the amount of stuff that's come out. Like everybody under the sun has come and had something to say about it. So I feel like Curse of Strahd is a sandbox. It is a sandbox. Even the Ravenloft adventure is a sandbox, but it's does it force railroading on them? I don't know, Monk, if it necessarily does that. I mean, there's an ultimate goal to try to achieve. Yeah, I'm going to apologize now. If you are on Patreon and you are a patron, your feed is going to be absolutely inundated with the stuff. I'm going to apologize right now. Um, it's just we're making so much stuff in the live streams and the Dungeon Master prep, and there's so much stuff that I've made over the past 6 months, and all of that is coming as well. So all of the slideshows are going to have a documentation thing as well for them. Once I'm happy with them, I'm not going to put them on Patreon until I am completely happy. But they will be coming. So, yeah, yeah. If you see me, try not to have me turned on to I'm a spammer. I'm not trying to spam you. What do you got here? Oscar. Funny moments on the Curse of Strahd. You want me to share some funny moments? Oh, okay. So there's a rock in that adventure, and one of the characters wound up getting lifted and dropped off the bridge and fell into the river. Uh, Good thing they were a revenant at that time. But it's the one time where where splitting the party was achieved by the dungeon master rather than the players doing it. There was the time that they wound up all killed. Like I had a total party kill when they went into a particular shop, and they all died. I won't tell you which shop it is, but you know which one it is, Oscar. And then I just had once they were dead, like the entire village just got decimated. And so I like, how do I bring them back into the game? Well, I'm not going to have them make a new character because I can't be bothered doing that. I didn't want to do that. I'd also told them they had to play the same character whether they died or not. So they were confused by that. So I just had the spirit of their character go into the body of various villagers that weren't too badly messed up. So some people wound up as a midwife, small children. Um, Somebody who had white skin like myself wound up as I think it was a black farm. Was it a black? No, it was a blacksmith with dark skin. I did all sorts of things. Yeah, I used a lot of dark gifts. Probably the funniest thing though was suddenly I tricked my players into thinking that they were venom vampire spawn. I had them completely convinced for ages. Um, I remember when the player characters had one of the members wound up becoming a werewolf, transforming, and he had some control, but I keep rolling or have him roll to see if he could maintain control. I was actually rolling as well. And they were like, no, he's all good. He's helping us. He's really powerful. We want to keep him. And I said, you really sure? You could just use the remove curse spell and just get rid of it. No, don't want to do that. And then the wrong time, I had a dice roll show up. It was the time when he would lose control, and he just had summoned about 8 wolves. This druid character who was a werewolf, becoming a werewolf. And so as a result of that, that one character and his 8 wolves ripped the party to pieces. And they were very upset. They realized their mistake at the end of that. So I don't know if that's a funny story. It's a silly story. Christy, back to preparing. Thank you again, Fred. You're welcome. All right, no problems. You go do your work. Yeah. You guys have said it long enough. You've told me that great for new dungeon masters, not great for intermediate to experienced. So now we have content for you that gets made every week for experienced and intermediate dungeon masters. Oh, Agile Monk, thank you for the super sticker. I'm a slow, aren't I? I'm slow. Thank you for the super sticker. I do appreciate it. Now, where are we? Did I miss anybody? Yeah, I would like to keep this going. So yes, support is always good. It means I can keep doing better stuff. I've been trying. So somebody had mentioned something about needing to play solo because they couldn't find a group and they couldn't dungeon master because of their job. So I'm looking at trying to do a live stream when I do enough research on how to run solo Dungeons and Dragons. Um, so far I don't feel like I've found the information that people would need to do solo Dungeons and Dragons. I feel very sad for those people who are in that position, for whatever reason. But yeah, thank you, Fender. Okay, so yeah, dark gifts. So if you look, I've got a video on Curse of Strahd and dark gifts, the ones that the Adventurers League offered, and even the concept of dark gifts in the book. They're kind of pathetic. I found I needed to download some resources off the DM's Guild. You kind of have to make some of your own as well, because otherwise they just wind up being benefits. You need things that are detrimental as well. It's a dark gift, so it's not necessarily something you want to keep. It might have some advantages, but it can also mess you up. Yeah, exactly. Well, it looks to me like this is going to be a very short one, primarily because I can't demonstrate anything today, just because there are how many tripods? 2 tripods on my desk in the way, and I've got a microphone, which not the biggest issue. I've got lamps that are in the way. I'm waiting for my lights to come. I'm waiting for the final bits and pieces. I've spent a lot of money, so hopefully it's all going to work out nicely. Okay, so I think we can wrap it up there, and I will go and go back to work, which is what I'm supposed to be doing, is getting some stuff done. So let's just go, no, we don't need that. We're going to go here. This is what we're going to use for today. All right. So I want to thank everybody for showing up for the live stream. Hopefully you got the information that you required, and if you did, great. Okay, so wherever you are in the world, whether it be the morning, the afternoon, the night, the wee early morning, please look after yourself, your family, and your friends. Be nice to your neighbours, and hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s. Solo play. That's right, Agile Monk. I'm trying to find resources for playing solo Dungeons and Dragons. No Dungeon Master, just being a player and nothing else. Artichoke dip. Okay, thank you. I will check that out. Good to know.